Student fired from Oklahoma State newspaper for conservative views. This is coming from Young America's Foundation. Must be noted that this is definitely a conservative website, so there's no doubt at least some bias in the way this story is presented. But nevertheless, I today am talking about this story because my dad told me about it, and he's like, this is some very concerning stuff going on at your school, because I go to Oklahoma State University. And and so I looked into this. The Oklahoma State University newspaper is the Ocali, and they did get rid of an editor over a controversy regarding an opinion piece concerning the mask protocols taken at OSU. I will say this story is a bit more nuanced than I had been led to believe going into it. I'm going to read from a couple different sources concerning what happened here at my university. But nevertheless, I still think there is a bit of concerning element about it. And so let me just go ahead and read a little bit from that news story from the Young America's Foundation, which was like the only news organization that covered this. I couldn't really find anywhere else. So, if they got some things factually inaccurate, I really don't know, because there's not really any counter stories. But nevertheless, let's read a little bit from what they have to say about what happened to Maddison Farris, a student at OSU who is no longer working for the Ocali. The editor-in-chief of the Ocali at Oklahoma State University was forced to resign after the newspaper staff took issue with her anti-mask mandate opinion column, according to a tip received through Young America's Foundation's campus bias tip line. After being forced to leave her classroom for refusing to wear a mask, Maddison Farris wrote a column in the Ocali detailing the event and expressing her opposition to forced masking on campus. But it is more than a mask. It's control. It's control over my choices, desires, and body. I will not allow any institution to take away my right to decide for myself what is best and to make my own decisions, or to take away the rights and decisions of others, her September 9th column titled Enough is Enough read. On September 11th, the rest of the editorial board, excluding Farris, issued a correction. Okay, so now I would like to actually read from that column, Enough is Enough, so you actually get some actual words, at least more than what that little piece gave you there, of what Maddison Farris said that made her column so controversial. And then I would also like to read the correction from the editors who opposed what Maddison Farris said in her article. So that way, you can get all sides, people. I'm not a journalist, but I'm doing my best to be fair about what the heck happened here. Because as I said, there is a concerning element to it. And, I'm all about truth, justice, and the American way. Because truth be told, I am Superman. Man is super. That I am. So here are a few excerpts from the column Enough is Enough in the opinion section of the Ocali. Last week I was kicked out of a classroom for not wearing a mask. Is this really what Oklahoma State has come to? When I was offered one by the professor, I shook my head no and was told to leave. I left without saying a word. My heart was pounding and I was confused. What just happened? Was I really just kicked out of a classroom for refusing a mask? Really? I had done my research prior to the class. Senate Bill 658 informed me that a mask could not be required of me within a school setting in the state of Oklahoma. Knowing this, I decided to take a stand. Multiple phone calls with the governor's office confirmed what I already knew. This instance occurred before the mandate injunction was passed by Oklahoma County District Judge Natalie May. Who knows? Next excerpt. If I believed that it was just a mask, then of course I would simply wear it for an hour or two and then go about my day. But it is more than a mask. It's control. It's control over my choices, desires, and body. I will not allow any institution to take away my right to decide for myself what is best and to make my own decisions, or to take away the rights and decisions of others. Students at Oklahoma State need to wake up and realize they have a voice. They have the right to make their own decisions, to make their own choices, to decide for themselves what is best for them. This is not about protecting you. This is about the university trying to appease the faculty after receiving threats of possible civil disobedience. Your voice, the student voice, is loud. It can be heard. There is strength in numbers, and the students outnumber the faculty by a great deal. To me, it seems like kind of a pretty popular opinion from a lot of people would probably get behind that. I don't really see what is so controversial about it. I mean, especially considering that it was an opinion piece. I think that if Maddison was to rewrite the story, I think she probably could have made a lot better case for her case. She did not provide any context for what she meant by "it's about control." She could have used examples, and I'll give you my perspective on this whole mask thing later, but I think she could have been more convincing. She just kind of made statements but didn't provide examples of what exactly she meant apart from the actual policy at the school. But nevertheless, again, I don't really think the opinion piece was all that crazy or controversial, given that, most people at my campus don't wear their masks. In most classes, at least that I'm in, the professors don't ask you to wear masks. And even the professors that do ask you to wear masks don't force you. So I don't really see that, I don't really see what the controversy is regarding the actual story itself. But let's read the correction from the notes from the other editors who opposed what Maddison Farris wrote. The Ocali editorial staff would like to address the column posted in our Friday paper. We'd first like to state that the words in the column are that of an opinion, which do not reflect the views of the whole editorial board. Although in a column the author or editor may disclose thoughts and opinions on contemporary scenes, it is not something representing the thoughts and opinions of the Ocali Media Group. As an editorial board, we would like to include some additional information excluded from the column. Oklahoma State has placed guidelines for professors to decide whether or not to require masks during their in-person instruction. When University Health Services, UHS, reports a positive COVID-19 case in a professor's class, they are allowed to do one of three things. 1, move the class online. 2, move to hybrid in-person/online instruction requiring masks for those coming to in-person instruction. Or 3, require masks for their in-person classes. This column does not state this professor has an immunocompromised system. In an effort to follow OSU's guidelines after a positive case in class, the professor required students to wear a mask in person. The full story is not disclosed in this piece, and professors are within their rights and within the law to ask students to wear a mask. Additionally, the way the law is explained in this piece is misleading. What is also not mentioned is the law does not apply to people such as teachers, principals, individual school officials, and professors. Senate Bill 658 does not apply to this situation. Nothing illegal was or is being done by asking students to wear a mask. We welcome any and all opinions offering rebuttal of this column and do not wish to diminish any opinion. As American citizens, we affirm our belief in the First Amendment and the right as journalists to express our personal opinions, no matter if our viewpoint is different from those around us. So a couple things about this correction. Number one, it's fine that they wrote it, but I do kind of think it's a little weird that they wrote a correction for an opinion piece. I don't typically hear about that, but whatever. I guess the Ocali editors were a little bit like, hey, we don't want to be affiliated with this opinion. It goes on and on about, the regulations they have for professors regarding masks and requiring them. And they claim here in this piece that Oklahoma law does allow them to ask students to wear masks in class. However, the thing is with the policy here, maybe I would just need to read up on this more. It says, one of their regulations that the faculty wants professors to follow is require masks for in-person classes if there's a positive COVID case in the class. They, in this correction, use a lot of very carefully worded language. Like they, for instance, say nothing illegal was or is being done by asking students to wear a mask. But the idea that Maddison Farris was getting at is that it's not okay for them to require you to wear a mask. Because I go to OSU and I see signs on the doors that say masks expected, because I know that there is a law that says that they can't put masks required. And so this correction, it accurately says nothing illegal was or is being done by asking students to wear a mask, but I don't think that that's what Maddison Farris was upset about. I think she was upset about her professor acting as if she could require it. And it seems that whoever wrote this correction, it seems like it was a collection of people, it seems that they know that too, that they can't say require it, because they say nothing illegal was or is being done by asking students to wear a mask. Asking and requiring are two different things. So it's an interesting correction. It's a little bit odd. But of course, the real story here is not the original article, it's not the correction, it's not the infighting that appeared to have gone on at the O'Colly. The real story here is that this Maddison Farris girl who wrote the original opinion piece, Enough is Enough, appears to have been forced out of her job as a result of all this. Even after the people in the correction who wrote the correction said, as American citizens, we affirm our belief in the First Amendment and the right as journalists to express our personal opinions, no matter if our viewpoint is different from those around us. This is where I'm getting to the concerning element, because if she was pushed out of her job for her opinion, then that does seem as if the O'Colly is not behaving ethically here. But let's read what Maddison Farris said in the Young America's Foundation paper about her resignation, her forced resignation, rather. And yeah, then we'll discuss. All right, so here is Maddison Farris's resignation piece. O'Colly Media Group and Editorial Board. I, Maddison Farris, hereby submit my letter of forced resignation, effective immediately. After the events of the past week, it has come to my attention that there is no longer a welcoming place for me within this publication. My time with the O'Colly taught me more about journalism than anything I have ever done, but has failed to be a beneficial learning environment. On Monday, September 13th, I was called into a meeting with the rest of the editors. I came to this meeting with prepared notes of apology and remorse. I was ready to admit to the mistakes I had made and work together to search for the best course of action moving forward. Before I could launch a constructive discussion, the board told me to resign from my position. Originally, I requested a letter of termination, but seeing as how I have already been fired in every way except verbal or written, I would like to submit this letter as a product of a forced resignation. I regret that this was the outcome of exercising my First Amendment rights, but even more so, I regret that I have been robbed of the opportunity to learn from my errors and that productive discussion was unable to take place. The lack of communication to me over the past few days has been disappointing, but it is clear to me that if this is how issues are handled within the walls of the O'Colly, I have no interest in continuing my time with the print side of journalism at O'Colly Media Group. I am confident that the team that I hired will do their best to produce good work and continue to build a diverse and accepting work environment. So at this point, the story seems really negative for the O'Colly. As it stands with the information I've given you just now, it seems that the O'Colly did force this young lady to resign for an opinion on masks that was different from what the school's established opinion was. If that is the case, then that is a problem. But it may not be that case. I would like to, as I said, provide further context, and then we will discuss the other possibility of why Maddison Farris might have been forced to resign. Reading back from that Young America's Foundation article. Farris told Young America's Foundation she was disappointed with the decision. The O'Colly was advertised as an accepting environment, a safe environment, a learning environment, and the events of the past few weeks have just proven how toxic it is and how not free the speech is on this campus, she said. Farris also told YAF that the other members of the O'Colly expressed their discomfort with the political subject matter and concern for working for a conservative paper. According to her, she had received edits on her column by the O'Colly's faculty advisor, John Helsley, prior to publication. She was also never given an opportunity to discuss or correct any perceived inaccuracies by the rest of the editorial board. Helsley, however, told YAF, I did not edit her column. She asked me to look at a small section, which she had a question about, and I did. So a couple things about that passage that I just read there that I'd like to point out. Number one, if Maddison Farris is telling the truth about, members of the O'Colly expressing discomfort with the political subject matter and concern about possibly being seen as working for a conservative paper, then that is a concern, if that's true. Like if the O'Colly is afraid to publish a conservative opinion in their newspaper that's supposed to be open and diverse to all different perspectives, then that means that their newspaper is actually really not open to all diverse perspectives. But again, that's hearsay, that's what she said. I don't know if that's true. I can't say because I don't work at the O'Colly. The other thing in this is it seems that Maddison might have been somewhat misleading regarding the faculty advisor, John Helsley, where she accused him of editing her column, and he said, no, you asked me to edit a certain little portion of it, but that's it. So she might have been a little dishonest in that instance? I don't know, but it's something to note regarding this story. There's a lot of stories that are presented as, these days anyways, where there's one person's the victim and the other person's the villain. More often than not, there's mostly just villains involved. And so this could be a situation where everybody acted disreputably. Okay, so now I'd like to read the last passage from that Young America's Foundation article, where it basically discusses more about the faculty advisor, John Helsley, and the whole situation surrounding Maddison Farris and her forced resignation. Faculty advisor of the Ocali, John Helsley, told YAF, "The paper encourages diversity of thought, opinion, and conversation. It is vital to what we do. Neither opinion nor the right to an opinion were at the heart of what ultimately resulted in Miss Farris's resignation." Forced resignation is her term. "There were other issues at play, which contributed to her editorial staff, all personally interviewed and selected by Miss Farris, concluding that the working relationship was untenable for them," he continued. When pressed on these other issues at play, he refused to elaborate, saying, "That's between the staff and Miss Farris." "The future of journalism is worth worrying for if editorial boards are so terrified of different opinions that they must correct them in sweeping condemnations and forced resignations. It's understandable to disagree with an opinion. However, stifling a speech that challenges authority and displays a controversial viewpoint is unacceptable." So here you have the other possible reason for why Maddison Farris was pushed out of the Ocali. It is alleged here by the faculty advisor that many of the people that worked with her found her just not at all pleasant to work with. I will say this, Young America's Foundation, I think they made a really good point that does call into question perhaps the Ocali's response to all this, when it says, "The future of journalism is worth worrying for if editorial boards are so terrified of different opinions that they must correct them in sweeping condemnations and forced resignations." As I said earlier, I thought it was kind of strange that the Ocali newspaper, they first published Maddison Farris's piece, and then they issued a correction to it when it was an opinion piece. You feel something going on regarding the word bias. I can't say so for sure, but I will say that there were several letters to the editor that were published in the Ocali. They were all from the pro-mask, kind of liberal view on this, as opposed to Maddison Farris's more conservative, libertarian view on this. Now, perhaps those were the only letters to the editor submitted in relation to Maddison Farris's piece. I don't know. All I do know is that, yes, there were sweeping condemnations, like everywhere across the Ocali, from the letters to the editor to the actual editors, regarding Maddison's piece. And I find that a little strange. It seems a little bit like an overreaction that shows a red hand. And, look, the whole idea of forced resignation, again, like, if it was for Maddison Farris's opinion regarding mask mandates, and that's why they forced her out, because they just were too afraid of being seen as conservative or whatever, then the whole idea of the Ocali caring about diverse perspectives is apparently not true. It seems that their slogan would, instead of being like diversity is our strength or whatever, it would instead be, in the name of diversity, conform to one point of view. If that is what happened here, if that is what really happened here, that's grossly unethical by the Ocali, that will have a chilling effect on free speech. People will be, just won't even write things in the Ocali because they'll be afraid that they'll just never get published. So the forced resignation thing is weird, but also it could be that just Maddison Farris is not fun to work with, is intolerable, and that was the real reason they fired her. I don't know. All I know is that this whole story it has a bad, icky feeling about it. Now, as for my opinion regarding Oklahoma State University's mask policy, here is my view, because as I said, I don't think Maddison Farris really made her position all that well for why she thinks it's all about control and that sort of thing. Whereas I do think she actually could make a pretty good case. Because my feeling on the mask, mandates or mask expected signs around campus at OSU they're pretty silly. And I don't really comply with, I even have a professor who does try to require masks. He says, it's school policy or whatever. I don't go along with that, neither does like 10 other people in the class. Me personally, the reason I don't go along with that is I had COVID the week before school started, and so I had to miss the first couple of classes, really, of my first week of school. But I now have natural immunity, and so I look at these like mask requirements and I'm like, I'm not going to comply with that. I already had COVID. I can't get it, at least as far as all research seems to show. Given the length of time that since I've had COVID, it's unbelievably unlikely that I could catch it again, and it's unbelievably unlikely that I could possibly spread it. And so I don't wear my mask anywhere in class. It's just not something I do. Now, as for like the general view of masks, I mean, again, I think Maddison could have pointed to all sorts of things regarding the idea of it being more of a control measure. I don't personally think anyone at OSU wants people to wear masks just because they want to control people. I think they mostly have the mask requirements and all that stuff because there's kind of a culture of universities where they just kind of all fall in line with the policy. And so that's really why I think OSU has their mask policies the way they have them. But on the broader scale, what I thought Maddison could have done to make her case for why she thinks the mask policies are really about control is she could have pointed to, I don't know, very prominent politicians and celebrities who tell all of us normal Americans, wear a mask, if you don't, you're killing grandma, and then show up at like, what was it, the Met Gala or the Emmys or whatever it's called, and for instance, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, she tells people all day long, wear a mask. She shows up with all these actors and celebrities not wearing a mask, wearing a dress that says "Eat the Rich" as she hangs out with the richest people on the planet. And so I see why Maddison Farris goes, oh no, this is not about our health and safety. This is about control. It's about seeing how much we will put up with. It's about ruling elite type people telling the commoners, no, you can't do this, no, you can't do this, ha ha ha. It's about, just seeing how much they can get away with. And there's been numerous examples of politicians, celebrities doing exactly that. Gavin Newsom of California, he did that. He wasn't wearing a mask at this dinner party while he was enforcing lockdowns and crazy restrictions on his people. And so I think that there is a lot of reason to say that a lot of the politics surrounding the mask mandates is not really about our health and safety. It's really more about control and power-hungry people who enjoy exercising power on others for the sake of exercising power on others. I do think there is a lot that can be said for that. Unfortunately, Maddison did not include that kind of those kinds of examples in her paper. She just made statements. It's about control. Well, you got to provide examples in order for people to take that point seriously. But I will also say the mask mandate thing, here's a graph from Statista, and they got their information, I believe, from the CDC and the WHO regarding coronavirus cases in the United States as of September 24th, 2021. So this information will be a little bit old by the time this video comes out, but nevertheless, it's recent enough to get the point across. These are the states that have had the most cases since the beginning of the pandemic regarding COVID. As you can see, California is number 1, Texas is number 2, Florida is number 3, New York is number 4, and Illinois is number 5. Now, what do you notice about these states? California, heavily masked during the entire pandemic, heavily. Texas, barely masked, ever. Florida, barely masked, ever. New York, heavily masked during the entire pandemic. Illinois, I don't really pay attention to Illinois, so I don't know what their policies were. But the point I'm trying to get across is whenever people say masks don't work, when you look at these graphs like this, it goes, well, mask states, number 1, California, is doing worse than Texas, which never used masks. And so the point that a lot of people make regarding the masks don't really prevent the spread of COVID-19 is when you look at the top 5 states, it's red and blue states. Everybody, regardless of whether or not they used masks or not, is having a rough time with COVID and COVID cases. It's still spreading like wildfire everywhere. Or at least it has spread like wildfire at certain times during this entire pandemic. And so it goes without saying, essentially, masks don't really make much of a difference. Or actually, in the case of California, they might actually make things worse. I don't really think they make things worse. I just think that they don't really, I just don't think that that effective because, I mean, look, like as I said, I go to Oklahoma State. I see what people wear for masks. They're wearing freaking bandanas and gaiters. I wore a gaiter. I wore this thing all during the pandemic. Okay? You can smoke a cigarette through this thing if you wanted to. And none of my professors took any issue with it because it really was just like they just were like, we just want something on your face. We want you to wear a face pacifier so we have the illusion of safety. Masks, maybe in lab-controlled settings, with particular types of masks, do prove to be effective. But in mass, people don't wear their masks correctly. So you have a blue state that was heavily masked during the entire pandemic as the #1 state in the country for coronavirus cases. And so the idea that you have to have mandates or requirements or anything like that is kind of ridiculous. I think that's something that a lot of people agree with, especially at this point. A bandana ain't gonna do shit, you know? And yet that's what's, you know, accepted still in universities and in businesses. It really does seem to be, as I said, a facial pacifier so that other people can have the illusion of safety. I just wanted to make this video about all this because, as I said, you know, there were some concerning things about it. The Ocali, I'm curious if anybody is watching this video who works for the Ocali and knows more about this situation. Please reach out to me in like my direct messages on Instagram, or if for some reason you're watching this on YouTube, just leave a comment. Because, you know, there is the question, like, if a more conservative libertarian or just unorthodox lefty decided to write in the Ocali an opinion piece about, you know, any number of controversial issues. You know, say there was a student who wanted to write against, you know, certain, like, I don't know, certain aspects of the transgender movement, or certain aspects of the, you know, what's it called? Critical race theory stuff that other universities are dealing with. The question that arises from reading a story like Maddison Farris's and just from the whole debacle that went down there, the question that arises is, would such papers ever be published in the Ocali? Would such papers that kind of challenge cultural norms on campus? Because to make no mistake, at least for me, there definitely is more of a liberal bubble on Oklahoma State's campus, at least in the departments that I've been in. You know, and my evidence for that is most professors I have are not openly political, but all of the ones that have been during my time at OSU have all been openly political on the left. That's not to say that I've never had a conservative professor, it's just that they've never talked about politics in class. And so there is a little bit of a culture on campus, and so I don't know, I wanted to make this video because if I read a story like this where it's like, okay, one side of the aisle may have just been squashed for their point of view, it leads me to, you know, to ask the question, well, what other views are impermissible for the Ocali's opinion section? In their fear of being seen as a conservative newspaper, are they a leftist newspaper? You know, will they not publish conservative opinions in the future because of what happened regarding Maddison Farris's? Now, to their credit, Maddison Farris's piece is still up, and they did publish it in the first place, so, you know, maybe this is a non-issue regarding the Ocali in the future. All I know is I read all this and I went, I certainly hope that the journalism department at OSU is not becoming an activist department for one side of the political aisle. But what do I know? I'm just a guy who's making a video and putting it on the internet while wearing a t-shirt of Johnny Depp as Hunter S. Thompson smoking mescaline and shooting guns in Las Vegas. So, anyways though, ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe if you're on YouTube, or if you're on Instagram, I guess just like it and leave a comment if you found it interesting. And just remember, ladies and gentlemen, whether you're on the political right or the political left or the political center, ideology is your enemy. If you find yourself to be incapable of seeing what the world looks like in someone else's shoes, Don't make the mistake of thinking that you have an open mind.